welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you're new. I'm Elisa, and today I'm going to be telling you about all the books I read in February. So this is super late, but March has been not the greatest month for me. I've been dealing with kind of a depressive episode where I have not wanted to read, film, or really do anything that I don't immediately have to do. I am finally seeing the light at the end of that tunnel, and it is getting warmer and it is light outside longer. So the seasonal depression is finally ebbing, and I am finally reading and wanting to film. So without talking more about depression, let's get into the 11 books that I read in February. The first book I finished was for the Buzz Wordathon. The Buzz Wordathon for February's theme was a color in the title. So the first book I read for this was The Black Flamingo by Dean Atta. It is about our main character, Michael, who we start off with really young, and we kind of follow him through his experience, through his adolescence, through his childhood, as he, comes out and kind of figures out who he is as a person. When he gets to college, he joins the drag society and kind of discovers this whole new world and discovers more about himself as a person. I have discovered that I am absolutely in love with novels in verse, and this was no different. This was amazing. I gave it a 5-star. I really enjoyed reading it, and I do want to read it again. I am very happy that I did buy this on ebook and didn't check it out from the library, and that I can reread it at any time, because it's such an easy, beautiful read, and it just flows so nicely. The other book I read, well actually, the next book I read for the Buzz Wordathon was Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race. I listened to this on audiobook and absolutely loved it. I gave it 5 stars again. The reason I love this book so much is I think I personally have not learned about British history when it comes to slavery and racism and the mistreatment of Black people, and anything I have learned is very American-centric. I appreciated reading this because it was a lot of history that I have never been taught and that I'd never sought out myself. I thought it, covered such important history topics and so many things that I had never heard about, and my head is probably buried in the sand as a stupid, privileged American, but I just really appreciated it. Next up, I read Feel It Out by Jordan Sondler. This was a super quick, super kind of, I don't want to say surface level book about, what is like the tagline of it? The Guide to Getting in Touch with Your Goals, Your Relationships, and Yourself. I gave this a 3-star. I remember so very little of this. I know I read it while I was getting the first dose of my vaccine, and that's all I remember about it. Like, it really did not impact me at all, so I should probably lower the star rating, but I think it was just like a non-offensive, really short little book with some missives about, mental health and your life and, getting things together and, being in touch with your feelings, but I cannot for the life of me remember any aspect of it or how I felt about it, other than the fact that it was super short, like it was an hour-long audiobook, and it was just fine. Then I listened to, I own a copy, but I did listen to this, He's Just Not That Into You, the newly expanded edition, The No Excuses Truth to Understanding Guys by Greg Behrendt and Liz Tuccillo. I gave this 3 stars. It's super outdated. What year was this published? It was published in 2006, probably even before that. I would actually argue that that might be wrong. It was apparently published in 2006, and it shows. I think dating has completely changed in the last, 5 years, much less, 15 years since this book was published. And I think it really, really showed. There were also I gave it a 3-star, but like looking back, it also really annoys me because there's a lot of what I would call kind of misogynistic, I don't like this, so all men don't like this kind of thing in it, and I just didn't appreciate that. Certain things, sure. It's a good reality check as far as like, you shouldn't have to put in all of this effort for a person who's not putting in anything. Yes, makes sense. But other things where it was like, don't ask him out, don't do this, and I feel like we've evolved as a society enough where it's not, a problem, like to start the conversation with a man. Look at Bumble. But I didn't find it totally offensive. I read some of the reviews and people were like genuinely angry. I wasn't mad at it. I just was like, this is definitely dated. So I read it. It's out of my collection now. I don't think I gained anything from it. Next up, I started this book during the Buzzwordathon, but I was not able to finish it, and I'm glad that I didn't try to read it in a week, because at first I thought I wasn't enjoying it, and I was kind of super upset about it because it was taking me a while. But then as I just let myself take my time with it, I think I enjoyed it even more, and that is The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. Everyone has talked about this book. It's incredible. It is absolutely incredible. It's middle grade for adults. It really is. It is about this orphanage with these exceptional children that have basically been exiled to this island, and our main character, what is his name? Linus, who was sent to basically investigate the orphanage, make sure everything's okay, and he meets the head of the orphanage. What is his name? Arthur. He meets the head of the orphanage, Arthur, and you know, maybe some sparks fly, but we meet these children and how exceptional they are, and how even though they are scary, they're still children and they still have, you know, dreams and love and kindness in them. And it's a lot of like a nature versus nurture thing, where yes, this is who they are, but they're being nurtured by this lovely man who just wants the best for them. It's incredible. Like, I loved it. I did take like probably 2 or so weeks. It was probably when I was starting to feel kind of depressed. February was kind of a slow reading month for me, but this I'm really happy I took my time with, because I was really able to appreciate it, and it was just everything. It was lovely. It's probably going to be one of my favorite books of the year. I understand why everyone loves this book. Next up, I read The Cousins by Karen M. McManus. Oh, Karen McManus. Okay. So she wrote One of Us is Lying, and when I read that when I was in college, loved it. I read it in about a day. I skipped homework to read it. I was obsessed with it. And her second 2 books, I was like, I did not enjoy. I had real problems with too many characters, things like that. The Cousins, I liked a lot more, for sure. Karen McManus does crazy twists pretty well in a way that is unbelievable, but still just believable enough where you're like, okay, I can get on board with that. Sometimes better than others, for sure. For me, this did work a lot better than the last 2 novels that I read by her. I didn't love it quite as much as I had loved One of Us is Lying when I first read it. I'm also not sure I would have really liked One of Us is Lying now. I think I've evolved a little bit as a reader, especially a reader of thrillers. I appreciated this a lot. I was locked in once I started. I did finish this in probably a day and a half, and I just wanted to know. I wanted to know what the hell was going on, and I liked it. It is about 3 cousins who go to this island to meet their grandmother, who has basically cut out her entire family, and no one knows why. And they come to this island to, yeah, it's an island. They come to this island, to this resort, and they all have their own reasons for wanting to get to know their grandmother and wanting to get to know each other. So I'll leave it there. It's kind of insane in moments and a little bit unbelievable to the point of like, okay, but I feel that way about most YA thrillers now, so I didn't totally dock it. So I gave it a 3-star. It was fine, but kind of forgettable, because already I'm like, what happened in this book? Next up, I read Decluttering at the Speed of Life, Winning Your Never-Ending Battle with Stuff by Donna K. White. I listened to this. It was fine. It's one of those basic decluttering books that kind of goes against Marie Kondo, where her philosophy is kind of just declutter what you can see first, so that if you have to stop in 10 minutes, you haven't uprooted a whole drawer that is now a whole mess. And that's like her big thing. She has like her steps that she does and the questions that she asks when she declutters that are pretty different from the Marie Kondo method. I think it works if you're a busy mother, or if you just in general don't have time to do a huge Marie Kondo-esque declutter. It doesn't really work for me because I'm far enough in my declutter journey where I don't have visual clutter that bothers me. I definitely, if a minimalist came into my room, they'd be like, you have so much clutter. But to me, it's not clutter. My books are not clutter. My perfume is not clutter. So I think my mindset has changed a lot, and I'm at a point where this book was not super helpful, But I think it would be very helpful if you read the Marie Kondo method and you were like, that's so much work, I don't have time for that. This definitely edits the decluttering mindset enough where it's like, you just do what you can do in the moment and pick it up again when you have another 10 minutes. I gave this a 3-star. It doesn't work for me, but it would probably work for a lot of people. And because I just wanted to get all of these kinds of books out of off my TBR, it's called A Breakup Because It's Broken, The Smart Girls Breakup Buddy by Greg Bennett and Amira Ritula Bennett. This is a little bit more helpful. I think it would be more helpful to someone who is actively suffering from a breakup or is still having issues getting over a breakup. I've been single for a while now. My last situationship ended like a year and a half ago. I'm doing okay. I'm very lonely, but I'm not, you know, in the midst of a breakup. So this was not super applicable to me, but I can tap into that feeling pretty quickly. And this was just okay. It was a 3-star. I think it's a very basic breakup book, and really what it comes down to is it's more about taking the healthier route. You know, you shouldn't overeat, you shouldn't overdrink, you shouldn't, you know, text him a million times. It's just kind of, you know, cut and focus on yourself, which I think any TikTok, YouTube blogger can tell you now. But back in 2006, these were super popular. So it is what it is. It's just, you know, I actually appreciated in both of these books the female perspective a lot more than the male perspective, because the male perspective I think is really skewed by the 15 years, where the female perspective is a little bit more like, okay, yeah. Both of these books, 3 stars, not my fave. Next up, I reread Twilight, and I was actually very anxious to reread Twilight because I'm a very nostalgic rereader. I, you know, love rereading books. I love reading a book and having it be, you know, bring back memories of the first time I read it, or even like the 3rd time I reread it. I can like have very distinct memories of something. Like my first copy of Twilight I got from my local indie bookstore that has now closed, and I think about that a lot because I miss that bookstore a lot. But as far as rereading this, I hadn't reread Twilight in maybe a decade. It's been a very long time. Maybe not a decade, but it's been a very long time. And I had read Life and Death, and I read Midnight Sun. I read Life and Death probably like 2 years ago, and Midnight Sun back in October. Life and Death I didn't like. I didn't think her voice, I don't think Stephenie Meyer did the male voice very well, and I think that continued into Edward's voice. I didn't find Life and Death boring, I just felt it was very pointless and didn't need to be written. Midnight Sun I found was boring and pointless. Edward doesn't sleep, you're stuck with him all this time. This did not bore me because Bella sleeps, and we don't have to spend that month with Edward where he disappears. Like, she doesn't know where he is. Her life just goes back to, you know, what it had been. And it's like a paragraph of like, you know, that month passed. Whereas with Edward, it's like, oh, let's follow him up to Alaska and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, wow. I appreciated this so much more. I was so happy to still find joy in it. I do know its problems. I understand its problems, and I read it through that lens. And there are moments where I'm like, what the fuck? I do plan on continuing my reread of this series because of the nostalgia, and I am just happy that this didn't bore me to death like the last 2 books, like the last 2 retellings she wrote of this book that didn't need to exist. Next up, I read The Sea of Monsters by Rick Riordan. I remember very little of the first time I read this book. I remember the very first scene with the dodgeball, and I remember toward the end of the book with the Cyclops. That is all I remember. So it was very interesting to me to read this like it was my first time again when it wasn't. I liked it. It's definitely more of what I equate my feelings of Percy Jackson to. The reread of the first one, I was like, wow, this is like really good. This is a lot more fun than I remember having when reading this book. And I gave it a 4-star, I believe. This one is more on the nose of what I think of when I think of Percy Jackson. Just not really my thing. 3 stars. It was fine. It was fun. But it's just not, it's not my thing, like I said. And it's like funny because I love Circe by Madeline Miller. It's one of my favorite books, but like for some reason this one, these middle grade, it just doesn't do it for me. And I don't know why. And last up, the last book I've actually finished, and I didn't actually finish this till the 2nd of March, but I read the majority of this the last day of February, and that is When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole. This is really scary. Like, it is really scary. I gave it a 4-star. I understand the critiques where people were talking about they wish it was a little bit more subtle, but I think the overtness of this is what makes it so terrifying. It's about our main character, Sydney, who lives in a brownstone in Brooklyn on this street that has historically been black in recent history, and all of a sudden people start moving out and being replaced by like white hipsters and white middle class and middle-aged people, and it's gentrification. And Sydney's aware of this, but her and her new friend Theo, that's his name, Theo, start to discover that maybe something a little darker is going on. It's the like, and people were talking about how they wish it had been more subtle and that the villain had been a little bit more subtle and things like that. I just think the fact that this is so overt, but also weirdly believable and crazily fucked up. Like, it's supposed to make you angry, and you do get really angry at parts. And it's scary. It's scary because it is so obvious in a sense, and nobody does anything, basically. So, thought this was super scary. I gave it a 4-star. Really enjoyed it. I want to read more by Alyssa Cole because I think she does it. The pacing, I would say, the reason I knocked the star off is because the pacing is weird. I do agree with that one critique. It's a very slow build up to a very like quick end, but I also don't think it didn't work. So I liked it. 4 stars. Enjoyed it a lot. So those are the 11 books I read in February. I am expecting to have a very less than stellar March. I have not finished a book, and that's not good. I've started 3 or 4 of them, but I just am like not feeling it right now, which is awful. It sucks. It really sucks to be in a reading slump, especially after I just started my TBR game and I was super excited about it, and I was super excited about Tis the Damn Readathon, and I can't read. I don't know what it is, and then I'll get excited to read. I'll read like a chapter and then realize I have a bunch of grad school stuff I need to do. So, which is what I should be doing right now, to be honest, but here we are. But hopefully, fingers crossed, the latter half of the month of March for me will include a lot of reading, like a lot of reading. Like, I look at my TBR shelf and I'm like, for March, and I'm scared. But I can only do what I can do, so I need to be gentle with myself and not put so much pressure on myself to read every fucking book. So let me know what your favorite book that you read in February was, but thank you so much for watching as always. Comment, like, subscribe, all the normal stuff, and I'll see you guys again super soon. Bye.